Welcome to our podcast series, Raising Saints and Forming Scholars, where we delve into your questions about the world of classical education. We were made for truth, beauty, and goodness. Let's talk about it. What is a liberal education? What is the Institute for Catholic Liberal Education? Listen to our podcast with ICLE Director of School Services, Colleen Richards. In our discussion, you'll find out whether the classical method is a fad or a movement to reclaim our tradition. We will also compare the modern concern with objectives in education versus the ancient focus on searching for the truth in our studies. We are certain that after you listen to Ms. Richards, you will be inspired to reclaim our heritage as Catholics and as Americans, the inheritors of the Western tradition. Hello, welcome to our podcast today, where I have the honor of speaking with Colleen Richards from the Institute for Catholic Liberal Education. Hello, Colleen.
Hello, Janice. It's good to be here.
We're so glad that we're here. We are trying to reach out to our families and just share the excitement of the classical vision with them. And so I just want to remind everyone that we belong to the Institute for Catholic Liberal Education. And this wonderful organization helps Catholic classical schools like ours really become strengthened in the mission of growing in freedom, thus the word liberal. But everyone has heard enough from me. So I'm happy to ask you, Colleen, can you tell us about the Institute for Catholic Liberal Education?
Sure. Our institute was founded about the year 1999. And I say about because I think it was founded by Mr. Michael Van Hecke, a longtime educator,
Yes.
who had an idea that he had been given a real gift of beautiful Catholic education, and he had the idea of bringing it to other schools too. And I think he had the idea before he really knew how it was going to happen. And yet, he said yes to God, and he started this institute. And pretty soon his longtime friend and colleague, Dr. Andrew Seeley, said, we need an institute for Catholic education. He's like, oh, I've got one. And they started working together, and more people jumped on the train. Maybe you certainly know our executive director, Elizabeth Sullivan, and
Yes.
And now the faculty has grown. So we now serve, over 170 member schools.
Wow.
Plus a lot of not officially members, but it's our great gift to serve them as schools and also as individual educators.
Wow, that is really impressive. One of the topics I wanted to discuss with you as a Catholic in education, I notice sometimes when I speak to other Catholics about the classical method, sometimes there seems to be a misunderstanding where people feel like we're following a fad, or we're doing something new, or we're not really Catholic. So would you maybe want to speak to what it means to be a Catholic in the classical world?
Sure. There's so much there, Janice.
I know.
Yeah, there's so much there. Well, maybe I'll start with this. So people might have those false impressions because of what's been going on in recent decades, or maybe I'll jump back about 100 or 150 years. And that was really where modern progressive education started.
Yes.
People like, John Dewey, I call him kind of the poster child of progressive education. A lot of things have changed in education in the past 150 years. The funny thing is, before that, a lot of things in education had stayed the same.
Yes.
We go all the way back to, say, actual classical times. We're talking about before Christ, ancient Greece, ancient Rome. Those people, those educators, saw education as a way to grow in wisdom and virtue. They saw that. The centuries went by, Jesus Christ came, the Christians they knew that educational tradition. They took it up. They said, look, this is a search for wisdom and virtue. This is a search for truth. This is the search of Jesus Christ, right?
Yeah.
Christ is the truth. This in every way can conform to what we know as Christians. Of course, they had the benefit of revelation. Now Jesus Christ had come, had suffered and died for us, had established the church. So that tradition was building up over the centuries. And that context of what is often called classical education really became wrapped up in the education of that was supplied by the church. The church is the institution that really developed education for centuries, even you might say millennia. It's this phenomenon of public education is really very, very recent.
It is.
So when people think classical education is a fad, you kind of chuckle, because classical education has been this continuous desire to grow in wisdom and virtue through the development of the intellect, which is one of the powers of the soul. And we're simply reclaiming something that has been a part of the Catholic Church really since her inception. Yes, it did come from those ancient classical times, but it's leading us to something even more glorious, which is the true freedom of the sons and daughters of God.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I love how you remind us it's a reclaiming, which is why it's such hard work, and so I love that history lesson. I appreciate that. That really does help. And this is a really hard one, and I've seen you guys cover this at your conferences. How would you define classical education? I know this is a really hard one.
Well, one of the definitions that's out there, I just used a couple times, it's a education for wisdom and virtue, right? So that's one. Even the ancients would say that.
Yes.
We, as Catholics, we know we have even a loftier goal. Really, we want the sanctification of our students, that we're called to be saints and scholars. I think I saw something on
yes,
Holy Time.
That's right.
Sure. And it's exactly true, right? So citizens of heaven, and also good citizens on this world who know how to live. Another of the kind of the taglines, but very appropriate tagline, is an education in truth and beauty and goodness.
Yes.
For those of us, I think you were formed as an educator, maybe in the secular way. Is that
yes.
true? That's my
Yes.
background. Both of us. And so we know that as in education in school, it was all about achieving the objectives.
Right.
Well, that can be good. Certainly, there's a lot of good there. But I'm so grateful that now we get to teach about truths. Absolutely. About truth of Christ and truths along the way. Those beautiful, precious, wise things that I would love, I would hope to plant in the souls of my students. Right? This is what.
Absolutely. Yes. No, that's very helpful. And as your institute helps Catholic classical schools strengthen their mission, what are some of the challenges that you face?
Well, I think the biggest one, certainly in the beginning, when we're working with a school for the first time, maybe, is that schools are generally full of education majors like you and me.
Yeah.
Right? They've been educated, as we indicated, for objectives and not so much for the truth. And on the one hand, the really great things about these Catholic school teachers is the love they have for God, the love they have for their students, their dedication, they're hardworking, they're sacrificial. Nobody's in there making the big money. So they're these beautiful souls who themselves, like us, didn't receive this beautiful kind of education. We've been receiving what the state has given us, and we were formed to pass on what the state has given us. And so very often there's this ignorance, really good people, even good teachers, but an ignorance, we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
And so the challenge is trying to kindly, in charity, wake people up and go, hey, there's something really good over here. I'm telling you, it's really good. You're going to love it.
Yes.
And try to wake them up and encourage them to seek it out, because in the beginning, they just don't know about it.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned our secular formation. When I was fresh out of graduate school, I had to go back to school and get a degree in elementary education. And I remember being stunned that in one of my classes, we all had to sit in a circle and talk about how there was no such thing as truth, And in the classroom, we would sort of facilitate this kind of discussion, and the kids would come up with their own truth. And I just, I was in my 20s. I didn't know a whole lot about my faith, but I just remember thinking, this is not, there's something wrong here. And I continued to see that in all of my formation as an educator. And so discovering the classical method, like you say, it's been so life changing, and we wouldn't be able to do it without institutions like yours that, for one thing, provide this wonderful conference every summer for us all to get together and reflect on what we're trying to do in our Catholic schools. And I think it's amazing how different dioceses throughout the country are really jumping on board and getting so excited about that. Did you want to share anything about the Archdiocese of Denver? I know they're working with you guys in particular for teacher formation.
Oh, sure. Yes. Well, it was, I don't know, maybe a couple of years ago or so that the good folks in the Archdiocese of Denver in their Catholic schools office, superintendent is Elias Moe, and he's got a fantastic team out there.
He does.
But were friends of the Institute, and we're having this conversation that basically they've come to the conclusion that the teacher formation programs in the typical colleges and universities out there, frankly, even Catholic ones, often, really were not secular model. They're being formed in something that's cut off from the tradition. And sometimes they even come into, these new hires come into the Catholic schools and need to try to unteach things that have been taught. So they asked our institute if we would develop a credential program that would form teachers for working in the Catholic schools. And our institute said yes. My personal involvement in the project is basically nothing, but we do have some really excellent scholars, Catholic educators who are also scholars who developed and piloted the program in the Archdiocese of Denver. Denver now is in its second cohort, and last summer we launched a national cohort. The national cohort meets 3 times a year at Aquinas College, and the rest of the instruction is remote. It's all it's always tied to practical things that teachers are going to be using in their classrooms. So everyone registered in the cohort is a working teacher with a bachelor's degree, and the assignments are going to be really reinforcing what they're doing in the classroom. So I hear high praise for it every time I meet someone who's in the program.
Talk about thinking outside the box. I think it's just a wonderful initiative. I think it's great.
I completely agree. Why? Oh, who? Yeah. Who said to the state, hey, I really need you to be in charge of education? The church had developed education for generations, millennia.
Right. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, just to remind myself and our whole community that it is the church that has been connected to the classical vision since the very beginning. And institutions like yours and schools like ours are trying to reclaim, as you said so articulately, that vision of education. And it's just good to have a conversation with somebody like yourself, just to remind us of those objectives.
And you mentioned the conference, Janice. Last year we had 2 bishops speaking at our conference.
Yes.
Now, Bishop Conley is a longtime friend of the Institute, but also Bishop Daly, who is the current head for education with the USCCB. I mean, he's at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. He's the head of education. He's speaking at our conference and really, reinforcing what we're doing. So this is not something foreign to the church, not at all.
Exactly.
It is thoroughly Catholic.
And I can't remember which bishop it was last summer, but I'll never forget him talking about going to a Grateful Dead concert. And then he got tied up with the liberal arts, the Great Books program. I'm married to musicians / rock stars, so I really could relate to what he was saying. But I love that because that is the Catholic Church, as always, throughout her history in the world, and always recovering that truth and finding that vision once again. And yeah, those bishops give such a powerful testimony. So we're looking forward to that again this summer.
Yes. Yes. We'll have those announcements coming out soon.
Yes. Well, I want to say thank you for all the work that you do and for taking time to speak to us here at Holy Child.
It's a pleasure always to talk with you, Janice. God bless you.
Thank you, Colleen. God bless. Bye-bye.